Hi, I'm James Dunn. Welcome to the Inside Network.
Welcome to INDepth, and my guest is Michael Block, Chief Investment Officer at Australian Catholic Super, the $9.5 billion industry super fund. Welcome, Michael.
Thanks for having me, James.
It's a pleasure, Michael. Now, you have had some innovative things to talk about recently at Catholic Super, and we'll get to that in a minute. And it's mainly to do with the decumulation, the drawdown phase. And I wanted to talk about that because so much focus goes on to the accumulation phase, and the Australian super sector has shown such great capability in managing the accumulation phase, and that's what everyone seems to focus on. But the government's retirement income review has highlighted again the challenges in dealing with those who are drawing down on their superannuation. So can you talk to us about why the retirement phase has been so difficult to plan for, and what Catholic Super's instituted in that space?
Well, first and foremost, the retirement phase is incredibly difficult to get right. And the biggest reason is because interest rates are so low. Even if you, James, had $1 million in super, it probably wouldn't get you the income you wanted because you're going to live a lot longer than you think. Just taking a look at you, probably into your 90s, and you need a big chunk of change to get there. And the reason why most funds haven't done as much as they should have in that area is because they just haven't turned their mind to it. At our fund, about a third of our money, just shy of that, is already in retirement. So we're an older fund, having been around for 39 years. And therefore, we've already had to plan our retirement offerings. We have 2 award-winning offerings already, one that we've just enhanced, and we're obviously working with Frontier to try and get something ready to meet the new government regulations with SIPPers and the like. But you know, the big picture is that superannuation was designed to provide a retirement income. When interest rates are low, it just doesn't.
When is the mooted tipping point where the system overall moves into drawdown phase?
I think we've already passed it. So it's a bit hard to work out exactly, because with voluntary contributions and with funds like Australian Super and Host Plus having such young demographics, it matters for different funds. Our fund, it's either about to happen or has just happened, so very close. That applies to all funds with an older demographic. Our average member age is around 50 years old, and that compares to something more like 30 for some of the younger funds. So they've still got a bit of time to go. So I think the system as a whole is in drawdown.
It's interesting that you make that point, that the demographics are obviously very important for all funds, but they're different for all funds. No 2 funds are really the same in that area. But as our demographic in Australia continues to skew older, and as you said before, you're seeing a third of your members in drawdown phase. Can you provide some insight into the research and development of solutions that you've been working on for that cohort of your member base?
Yeah, so I'll try and take you. We first of all want to be able to help our members from when they first take a job all the way through retirement into old age, and even potentially to help them with nursing homes, funerals and the like. So we want to be able to help with everything. So the first initiative that we had was we totally changed our accumulation phase to a life cycle strategy that dovetails perfectly into our 2 retirement offerings. So it's important that everything is seamless and that people don't think that there's this magic age, let's call it 60 years old, when all of a sudden superannuation stops, you take your money out and you go on a round the world trip, because that money's meant to last you for the rest of your life and replace your income. And then really it's about trying to make a product that achieves what members want to do. I think that the most important thing that we do, and we've trademarked the name, is purpose-built superannuation. We think about it completely differently to the way everybody else does. For example, we work out what the members want in superannuation, what they want in retirement, and then we build it rather than just looking at their account balance. So for those people that want to have a property portfolio that they can ensure their ability for their children to buy property, we'll have a property option. For those people that want retirement income, and that's much more important to them than the capital, we're developing retirement income products, and that's our most recent initiative. And obviously for those people that need to insure against longevity and the fact that people are living longer, we're in the process of working with Frontier on a longevity product.
Longevity risk is a really interesting risk because it's obviously good news on the one hand to a lot of people that they're actually or most likely going to live longer than they thought they would, but that's got to be funded. And if you don't have enough money for living a lot longer than you thought you would, that can make for some sleepless nights. So with a lot of Australians, do you think the mindset or the understanding of retirement was, Michael, that they would take away their lump sum and run it down over the rest of their lives, and that longevity risk is making them realise, no, you've actually got to keep earning decent returns on the sum you take into retirement?
Well, I think you've put your finger on really the most difficult area of retirement. First and foremost, if you retire between 55 and 65, the chances are you're still going to live for another 30 years, which means there's a case to be made for having some growth assets in your portfolio and not for reverting to something very conservative that won't make the income that you need. But the two most important points I can make about retirement is that many superannuants will not have enough money to take them all the way through in their own plan, and they will need to rely to some extent on the age pension. And if they do, then they need very much less in super than they probably thought they did. For example, our planners would make the point, if you've only got to supplement the age pension with $10,000 or $20,000 per year from your own funds, well, 30 years at $10,000 is only $300,000. It's not going to be the millions of dollars that will totally replace your income. And secondly, obviously living longer, lower interest rates make the ability to have a lump sum to live out your days and then still have something to give your children very challenging. In fact, virtually impossible.
So that holding of growth assets in retirement, does that surprise a lot of people who may have thought that it was too risky in the growth asset classes to entrust retirement income to those asset classes, but when they speak with a planner, they find out that this longevity risk means that they are going to have more money, more of a proportion of their funds at risk in growth assets than they thought they would.
I would just say that necessity is the mother of invention. Whether they like it or not, putting your money in safe assets, bonds, cash, term deposits, guarantee you that you make a negative real return, and there's no way known you can live out your life in dignity. So you're forced to take some risk. So now it's just a question of matching the amount of risk you're comfortable taking with a portfolio that suits you, hence our variegated portfolios.
It surprises a lot of people that over the long term, just over half of the actual return from the share market comes from dividends, which are less volatile than the actual prices, the capital side of things. So how important is equity income in retirement funding?
Having just created an equity income product, we didn't use the name equity income. I think we called it Income Plus, but it's extremely important because exactly as you say, you've made a great point. The income from shares and property and all sorts of things like that is far more stable than the capital values. So if you just concentrate on buying an income stream, you can achieve much better results. You've got to balance that with people's natural feelings about this, and people just can't help themselves by looking at their account balance, and obviously it scares them. Just imagine if you were somebody holding $500,000 in super and you looked at that balance and it was down 30% at some stage in the last 6 months, meaning you've lost $150,000 of capital value, even though your income probably hasn't changed that much. That would scare the hell out of you.
I was going Yeah, I was going to ask whether February, March really tested what you're trying to say to retirees, that the share market can be a big help to them in their retirement.
We are very lucky, and perhaps great planning on our behalf, but we have a life cycle strategy, which meant all of our older members were placed in lower risk strategies. So, for example, when the average super fund lost 10% in a couple of months in the drawdown between February, March, our older members probably only lost 2, 3 or 4%. So they saw two things. One, yes, you can lose money, but it's not as bad as the other funds. And it helped them understand that they're going to have to take some equity risk in the future.
I understand that in the drawdown process, you offer multiple options for members. So are you able to make it individual to each member within reason, within certain products that are built around the preponderance of people who have similar needs?
Yes, we designed what we think is the state-of-the-art accumulation product that has 31 different stages, one for every age of your life between 40 and 70. The great news is it gives a lovely smooth return series, minimises sequencing risk, lowers fees, gives a better long-term result, and best of all, it's personalised for everyone up to each year of their age. The next steps will be to try and personalise it further by looking at things like gender, account balance, salary, etc. And that's in the planning stage right now. So, obviously it's aspirational to want to get down to a cohort of one, but we're going to have to come up with some compromise between that and some form of mass customisation, which is where we're at. But I think it's a pretty good compromise that, therefore, every person's strategy changes each year on their birthday, and they get a nice Christmas card from me that says, "Hello, James, you're a year older. We've taken a little bit more risk off to protect your savings as you've got older. Isn't that nice?" And now they can see in a big drawdown like the COVID-19 situation that it really made a big difference for them.
What are the three broad solutions that you've launched, and how were they designed?
The first one is a simple account-based pension based on choice. So that's where a planner would come and see you and tell you which option best suits you. The second option, that's called Retire Choice. Second option is Retire Smart. It's a bucket approach, which basically is an automated system that monitors how much cash you have, generally a couple of years' worth of expenses, and how much growth assets you have, and automatically rebalances between those two buckets. We're not unique in having something like that. Equip Super has one as well. I think theirs even has 3 buckets. Ours has 2 buckets. And the third solution is a longevity-based solution that will have to at least take into account some form of deferred annuity or annuitisation. And
well, I'm sorry again.
I was just going to say, that's just a work in progress. We're part of a longevity project with Frontier, and we'll see how that goes.
What were the major problems, Michael, when you sit down with a blank sheet of paper to design these retirement income products? What were the pitfalls that cropped up earliest?
Well, the first and biggest pitfall is that products are often designed by people like me who sit in a dark room and aren't connected with their membership, and their membership's not connected with them. I've made a really big effort over the last 2 years to get around the country. So every 6 months, travel most of our interstate offices, not recently, obviously, and meet our members, go to retirement seminars. I'm doing one of those in September again. This time it'll be by remote access. And at the end of the day, if I'm now going to try and design something that is both what my members want and what I think my members need, I have a much better chance if I've spoken to them. But really the biggest problem of always is that what an average member wants is something that's very hard to produce, as in they want something that's going to replace their income and not dip into their capital. And when the markets are moving along strongly, that's a bit easier. Australia's had a fantastic time of it the last 30 years. I think the next 30 are going to be much more challenging in a low interest rate environment. And if you said to the average person, I've got this thing, it's called an annuity, you put a couple of $100,000 in, it pays you an income, but then when you die, there's nothing left. People don't like that idea. Australians are very reluctant to the concept of a life certain annuity.
Even though we're a nation of punters, Michael, we can gamble with the actuaries and enjoy free money if we live longer than they thought we would.
That's exactly right. And by the way, most people, surprisingly, are conservative when it comes to how long they're going to live and don't realise they're going to live as long as they will. I'm sure you've seen some of the statistics, and that is someone born today is going to live in their 90s. Average age for a man, mortality is 88. But if you're already 58 like I am, it's well into the 90s.
What about approaching your membership base? Is the diversity of your membership base more or less diverse, do you think, than other funds around the marketplace?
We have a very homogenous base, 75% female, predominantly teachers and workers in the Catholic education system. So very ethical, faith-based, conservative, and believe it or not, because they're female, generally better investors and more conservative. So very homogenous.
Did that mean, Michael, that you were fully implementing ESG considerations before they became as popular as they are?
Me personally, yes. I first implemented ESG for the University of New South Wales in the 90s. Our fund, yes. We were one of the first funds to have a responsible investment option. I think it's been going around since about 2002. I may add that it's done sensationally well, 2.91% return this financial year. And we've just appointed our first full-time ESG officer about 9 months ago. And she and I are working very closely to increase the ESG footprint of our fund, because we see that as a very, very important initiative in the future.
What about Australia moving to the retirement income market in Australia, with the government and the long mooted comprehensive income product for retirement, the SIPPers that you mentioned before, the industry has it been, or in your case, do you think preempting what might come in a legislated sense has been a good business move?
Yes. We pride ourselves at being ahead of the curve. It doesn't always work out perfectly, but we would love to say that we're a very innovative fund and we gain the advantages of being first mover in a lot of areas. So it's an absolutely wonderful situation to be in, to already have 2 mature products, a third of our money in retirement, and understand what our members want in that area. The SIPPer thing is going to be really interesting. This is a government in panic. And the reason is that if you do your sums and you work out how much money the government's going to have to pay in age pensions, if not supplemented by people's own savings, it's a very big number. And it's going up all the time. And with interest rates as low as they are, it's looking like an even worse situation. And therefore, everybody's now scrambling to work out a way to solve this problem. I think it's going to be very difficult. And now layer on top of that, the JobKeeper and the job seeker allowances that have been paid across COVID, they're ultimately going to have to be paid by someone, somewhere, somehow. And so I'm very interested to see what additional revenue streams the government will want to attach and where to.
And given that you are out in the marketplace, well, firstly, I was going to ask, are there alternative or similar options to yours in the marketplace? And the second part of that question is that as a leader in getting product out there, do you feel you'll be copied, and have you already seen that?
Yes. So we're not the only fund with a life cycle strategy, but we believe we have the state-of-the-art one with the best way of dealing with sequencing risk by having those additional stages. I may add it caused great additional expense in terms of disclosure and reporting. We're not the only one with a bucket approach, but by the time we make the enhancements that are in train to that, we believe that it'll be one of the best in the market and able to cater for retirees with any risk profile. Our SIPR product, we're not going to try and do this one on our own because pooling longevity risk is a great idea. And that's why we're happy to consider working with other superannuation funds. So it's, a balancing act. And if somebody copies what we do, we're very happy because imitation's the sincerest form of flattery. So not worried. But by the other hand, I always like to think that I was unique. When I was in my cadet passing out parade, my mum turned to my dad and said, "Look, David, Michael's the only one in step." So, as I said, it's a balancing act.
Michael, with your fund at $9.5 billion, it's getting quite large, but what actually is, in your view, the optimum size for a super fund to do everything effectively and have economies of scale, but not get too big?
Well, that's a really interesting question, James. I'm so glad you asked. I think the answer is you want to be big enough that you can command some pricing tension, and you don't want to be too big that you can't invest in smaller markets. So from an investment viewpoint, anywhere between 10 and 30 billion makes a lot of sense, because then you can invest in small cap strategies, hybrids, all sorts of things that the big boys can't play in. And that's the advantage of us being small, nimble, innovative. On the other hand, if you get bigger, you can get some economies of scale in your administration and things like that. And so it's a balancing act. At the end of the day, anywhere under $50 billion makes sense to me. And once you start getting above that, I'd be concerned that you start getting diseconomies of scale. If you're 100 billion or bigger, how on earth do you invest actively in the Australian property market, the Australian share market? And we can see that. All the large funds now invest just about passively or passively enhanced in the Australian share market. And that gives us smaller funds a great advantage going forward.
But that sounds, Michael, as though you're always open to potential discussions with any merger partners that might want to talk to you.
Absolutely, James. Australian Catholic Super is the product of 13 like-minded mergers in the past. The official line is that we're absolutely open to talk to anyone if they can show that it's in our best interest and their best interest to dance. And so, please, if that were to come about, that would be great news for all of our members. If not, then we'll just have to grow our assets ourselves by attracting new members and new stakeholders.
Thank you very much, Michael. This has been a really interesting discussion. I'm very, very pleased to have had it. My guest on INDepth has been Michael Block, Chief Investment Officer at Australian Catholic Superannuation. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks again for having me, James, and thanks to the Inside Network for making this happen. Cheers and stay safe.